Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Today on Econ 102, we're republishing a conversation Noah Smith and Matt Yglesias hosted live on Substack this past Monday. They reflect on the rise of electric motors and batteries, the role of industrial policy, and how partisan narratives have obscured transformative advances. Please enjoy.
Right. So this is a really big deal because in the 1800s, the way we knew how to harness energy was to burn a thing, have it either boil water to produce steam to turn a wheel, or to just basically that's what we did. That's how we harnessed energy. And then later we learned how to, create this controlled explosion like in an engine and turn these gears, right? We turn the gears. That provides the power. Then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we discovered this other way to create power, which was to basically push electrons through wires. And it wasn't as powerful at the time. You couldn't, and it wasn't as transferable. Batteries were kind of shitty and you couldn't carry it around very well. You had to sort of generate it from these huge power plants and send it through these big lossy wires and stuff to your house. But you could do so much more fine control with it because you have the wires to tell the energy where to go. So you could, in a factory, instead of having everything turned by one big crankshaft, you could have these little wires go to like little independent workstations, so you could be much more efficient, and you could turn on your lights, and later you could use a computer and all this stuff. So you had electrical stuff for control and then combustion for power. This is the history of human energy use in the industrial age. So then around the 1990s and early 2000s, something happened, which was we invented several things. We invented batteries that could hold a hell of a lot more energy, lithium-ion batteries and all the variants of that could hold a lot more energy charge and recharge, all this stuff. You basically carry around a ton of energy. And then we invented these permanent magnets, basically. Rare earths is basically just a crystalline form that holds the little electron or holds the magnetic spins in place, so that you have a magnet that just never stops magneting. It's much better than your refrigerator magnet. So yeah, and because of that, you could build these very high torque motors, get a lot of power out really fast, mechanical power, instead of having to turn these gears. It's just frictionless, it's just a field.
And this is why you get, lots of stuff like battery powered power tools, right? Which is like not as much of a hot button political issue as some other things, but that are really taking over because they have a more powerful motor now, and you can get better batteries sort of cheaper than you used to be able to. They're quieter, they're easier to carry.
Smaller.
They're not like stinky, exploding gas. And I mean, part of what's interesting about this, right, is like when you keep this stuff like out of the political arena, like people, I don't see like huge amounts of, people getting upset about like battery powered drills and the future of the world. But like it's all made in China.
It is not all made in China. So for Tesla, most of its stuff is made in America.
True.
And, Tesla makes stuff in China, but it's for China. And the stuff, if you buy a Tesla in America, that was made almost entirely in America.
Mm-hmm.
So Elon Musk, our favorite guy, makes all this stuff in America, and it's actually reasonably priced.
People love him. American manufacturing, low carbon cars, right? A liberal hero.
You could have been the greatest. Anyway, yeah. So no, we do make some of the stuff like what China makes. Almost all of it does the metal processing for things, because metal processing is so environmentally bad. It'll screw up your town. It'll screw up your kids. Mm-hmm. And it makes like zero profit margins. Okay. So that'll be very hard to reshore to America. We can do that. We have the technology. We know exactly how to do that. And once we start doing a lot of it, we get better at it. We won't do it because of pollution, because of low profit margins, because of, nobody wants that stuff in America. So we can do it in Mexico, except Mexico is now going to
Right. But so you could have a fringe shore supply chain where poorer countries that have a different like cost benefit analysis around pollution sort of take the nasty parts.
It's and not just a different cost benefit analysis. They have like places, they have more desert than we do.
Okay.
They have Baja California, where there's parts of Baja California where there's nobody. Like there's, I mean, honestly, we could do it too. Like if we didn't have scenic tourism in like Death Valley, I don't know. So like there are places we could put metal processing and then put roads to and from these things and then have people drive in so their kids don't get, screwed up. But it's just, it costs a lot of money. We've got to do it. And who's going to pay that money?
Yeah. Right. So like, what's the problem here? Right. I mean, these are like these great emerging technologies. It is giving people better experiences with certain kinds of things. We're having more powerful motors. We're having cleaner ways to do certain stuff. It all seems good. But you wrote a post. So basically, I think expressing concern, the United States has become too complacent to sort of fully embrace these things that are at the technical frontier.
Yes, that's right. And I think, so for example, AI, I think we're actually doing well. We are embracing AI. People are using it. We're making it. We have companies making it. And, probably Trump was right to kill whatever regulations Biden made on AI because those regulations were doing absolutely nothing. They were just creating excess like considerations for companies making it because whatever those regulations were applied to was not the state of the art next week. So those Biden regulations were useless. They weren't that harmful, but they weren't, they could have been the template for things that were considerably more harmful, like Scott Wiener's bill in California that did not pass. And so, or that I think Newsom vetoed. And so, which was smart to veto that bill. That was bad, and Scott Wiener shouldn't have done it. But anyway, but we're doing pretty well in AI. Everybody talks about, DeepSeek, China, blah, blah, blah. America is at the forefront of AI, even though it costs us a lot of money to do that. But we are paying that money, and we're staying at the forefront of AI. Where we're not staying at the forefront is this electrical technology stuff. And people have just So the Democrats were actually willing to support all this because as an ancillary benefit, it doesn't emit carbon.
Right.
Much carbon, and so it emits a little carbon. And so not much. And so as an ancillary benefit, it helped climate change. The Democrats were willing to do it. And not only that, they were willing to shell out large amounts of money for it, with the IRA, right, which was a great industrial policy. IRA was great. Battery factories were mushrooming up all across the South and the Midwest, and we were just, we were getting serious about this technology for the first time ever. It wasn't nearly enough. And the pieces of it that were the purely government parts, like, we're going to have the government build EV chargers. Well, that didn't work because of reasons we could go into. We all know those.
Yeah.
Read abundance. Read why nothing worked. Anyways, but then private companies were building a shit ton of EV chargers, and because we were going to subsidize EVs, we basically used subsidies to tell everybody, hey guys, it's battery and EV time.
Right.
It's battery motor time. It's time. Go do it. And so the public, the private sector committed much more money to this than the public sector did. Those subsidies were a very small part. They were just sort of a prompt or a coordination device for the private sector to start building all this stuff that we wanted to build. And it was working. But the thing is, the political price of telling everyone that climate was the main benefit meant that Republicans and conservatives totally failed to understand the power of these technologies and the importance of these technologies. And so they thought it was just some climate thing. And so they canceled it out of culture wars.
Right. Well, I mean, out of culture wars, but I mean, also it's a economic policy of a kind, right? I mean, they want this tax cut bill. They need various offsets for it. I think it was more politically appealing to kill these kind of tax credits than to, go after Medicare, go after Social Security, things like that. So, I mean, yes, there's a culture war aspect to it. And I think the Biden administration had not really sold. They did a good job, I think, of not having backlash to this bill, right? You didn't have an equivalent of the Tea Party, people marching in the streets to be we need to stop the battery subsidies. But also most people, I just think were not particularly bought in on this idea of technological transformation and global competition with China, this other kind of stuff. And and some of that's the former president's communication limitations. But some of it is, as you say, I mean, it was sold to the left as this is our climate strategy.
Yes. And so this is actually a thing where one of the rare places where you and I argued. And it turned out that you were right. I'm very surprised that you were right, but you were right.
Wait, what was I right about?
So you were saying all this focus on climate.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a second. No, climate is how you sell electrical technologies to the left. Like it's getting it done. We're getting the IRA. We're talking about climate, but it's really about energy and it's getting it done. And I think you saw a little farther into the political future and you realized that the Republican backlash against something that was framed only in climate terms and the degree to which independents and, just normies would go along with that backlash. I think you saw that in a way that I didn't, because I was only thinking the short term, how do we actually get this in a bill? How do we get these things, how do we get the IRA? Now, I won't say I was completely wrong about this, because I think that is how we got the IRA.
It is. I mean, I think part of the struggle is that Biden sold climate advocates on the IRA as a strategy, but he only kind of sold them like halfway. Right. So like once the bill passes, the logical next step is we need to work on like this transmission siting and grid interconnection and all this other stuff so that it's like easier to actually like bring solar power online. Right. And like Joe Manchin sold the White House on that. Like they committed to it verbally. But then immediately this got labeled as like Manchin's dirty deal and we need to stop it. And all of the like lobbying effort of the climate organizations went into A, like killing permitting reform, and then B, trying to get Biden to block LNG exports, trying to stop this Ambler Road project in Alaska, which I don't understand what
LNG exports. Well, just to the audience, the reason blocking LNG exports hurts electrical technology is that it floods our own domestic market with natural gas, making natural gas cheaper than solar temporarily and artificially.
Right. And so this was sort of like the case they made for it was like, hey, moderates, like you like cheap energy, right? So like blocking the LNG exports actually makes energy cheaper, which like, okay, but it slowed domestic transition by keeping natural gas cheap, but also globally, right? Like there's a lot of gas renewable complementarities at like certain points on the adoption curve. Anyway, there was all this stuff that the climate, like extra next steps that the climate movement wanted from the Biden administration. And they spent a lot of time like saying yes to some of those asks or like apologizing really profusely for not saying yes to all of them. And, it didn't, if they had closed the deal or if the climate groups had been smarter to be like, we actually got a very significant decarbonization initiative that like we now need to like sell as like technological modernization and transformation, we'd be in way better shape. But they were like half sold, like they were glad to do it to pocket the money, but like not to like, convert.
Right.
And it's unfortunate.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, nothing. It's just, it's bad. And now we have, there were these like 20 House Republicans who signed a letter that was like, we shouldn't repeal these technology neutral tax credits. It's like really important to the future. And then Mike Johnson just called their bluff and was like, I'm not going to give you what you want. And then they didn't vote against the bill. And now we're fucked.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays. The same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com.
Yeah. And so almost no one in America understands the importance of this technological transition. And yet the people running China do understand. Like, very importantly, Xi Jinping, I believe, is not a very smart guy. I think, he's not a complete dumbass, but he's basically your sort of average boomer dad who's now been put in charge of this massive country and apparatus. He doesn't understand it well, but his advisors, they have all these expert advisory councils. They have told the top guys of the CCP that electrical technology is the future, batteries are the future, motors are the future. We do this well, and if we do this more, we're going to take over from those bad Western people that we don't like to do the opium war and bullshit. And so they told them that, and that they sold them on that, and then they gave a lot of money for that, and not just money, but they cleared the way in every possible way for this. And so that's why China's EVs are taking over the world, and Tesla is going to die. Like BYD is going to just slaughter. BYD and Xiaomi are just going to slaughter Tesla in the global market. Even if Elon Musk had spent all his time like trying to make Tesla win, it would be very difficult because it lacks some of this government support. It would have been a much fairer fight, but it's going to be hard. It would have been hard, but now it's just impossible because Elon basically decided to do things other than like have Tesla like be the future of all technology kind of thing that he should have done from day one. And then maybe now he's going back to, now the administration sort of kicked him out, halfway kicked him out. But like,
I mean,
you know more about that than me.
Well, I mean, I hope that he spends more time like on his actual companies doing something useful. But I had also, when he first started like breaking right, and being like very, very, very right wing on certain culture war issues, I was kind of optimistic in some ways that he was gonna like sell Republicans on electric cars, and that seems like that has like really not worked at all.
And
like
Trump couldn't sell them on vaccines,
right?
There's grassroots energy.
There is grassroots, but there's also like is an elite lobbying aspect, right? Like they did not need to put on the floor this like affirmative vote to block California from putting stricter emissions standards on cars there, but like they did. Like Republicans think it's good politics. Elon did not lobby anyone or do any tweets that was like, hey guys, like air pollution is actually bad, this kind of stuff. And so it's passing now. I used to think that without strong policy measures, electric car adoption was just going to be really slow. You said that was wrong, and you were correct. I'd become convinced. I mean, electric cars are going to win regardless of policy.
Yeah.
But the pace of adoption, matters, is responsive to policy. The U.S., which has, very low gasoline taxes and now is backing away from air quality regulation, will have slower pace of adoption. And now that the best electric cars are Chinese and are subject to these very high tariffs, right? I mean, we're running the risk of developing this protected industry based on sort of outdated internal combustion technology that will have this like, patriotic, reactionary sort of cultural halo around it, right? I mean, because that's really like, the worst kind of industrial policy is like, we're not going to let the good Chinese electric cars come in because they would drive our companies out of business. So our companies are going to, right. So our companies are going to keep making, internal combustion engine trucks that there's no external market for. But America's a big country. So like you could have a viable business selling ICE trucks only to Americans, but like,
that's right. And that post that I wrote about the technology of the future didn't start with that topic. It started with the idea that America is like late imperial China, in that we think we're the whole world. We don't recognize that the rest of the world matters economically to us. And because of that, we are cutting ourselves off from foreign technologies because it doesn't matter for our domestic market, and our domestic market is just so damn big. And so we are now in the position of the Ming and Qing dynasties.
Yes. And what are we? We have the second largest domestic market now, right? I mean, China's surpassed us, I think, depending on how seriously you take the purchasing power parities. But like by raw unit of automobiles, China definitely has a larger market, and other things like that.
4 times the size of us. They are as much bigger than us as we are bigger than Germany.
Yes, I have a book about this. 1 billion Americans. There's a lot of people in China.
How you feeling about the 1 billion Americans plan?
It's not going well. These things I think like all concatenate though, which is that there's a lot of, elite interest in America, bipartisan in a lot of ways, in, geopolitical competition with China and different sort of ideas that like follow from the idea that we should take this very seriously. But there's like basically no real buy-in, I think, from like voters, from practical politicians. I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of like China, like yak kind of stuff, but it's not at all
that's
like
exaggerated. There's stuff that happens. It's just not nearly enough.
Things happen, but I mean, people used to talk like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? About like, maybe someday there'll be like a Sputnik moment, right? In which people are going to like put partisanship aside and do things that involve like difficult choices and trade-offs, but it's going to be done for whatever. And, that the lines of US and China keep moving such that you can't say anymore that US GDP is clearly bigger. You can't say anymore that the US clearly dominates at the technological frontier. There are aspects of the technological frontier where we dominate, but also clearly aspects where we are laggards. And it's like, it's definitely something people talk about, but it's not something that seems to me to be motivating. You saw this with the IRA, right? I mean, the Breakthrough Institute guys had, I think, like a pretty good proposal that was like, you could pare back the volume of IRA spending by a good amount while still keeping the stuff that was like really focused on leading edge innovation. Because a lot of it is like just trying to like moderately speed up the rate at which people buy induction stoves, which is like not that valuable of an exercise unless you're really focused on like Paris Climate Pledge stuff.
Unless you're invested in an electric stove company like some of us.
Okay. But that's
financial disclosure.
But that's the really good electric stove, right? I think that one's too expensive to qualify. Anyway, so I'm bummed out.
It did.
Oh, it did?
It was going to qualify, and then now it will not. People will still buy it, fine, but like it will not. It will no longer qualify for that big tax credit.
Bummer. Wait, Impulse?
Impulse will conquer. It will conquer the world anyway. You should get an Impulse stove.
I'm eagerly awaiting.
All right.
When I will.
I'll see if I can call them up and yell at them to give you an Impulse stove.
No. I mean, they're expensive, but I'll be in the market. I have an induction stove. It's pretty good. I'm sold. For all that I trolled the climate people on my professional work, I have rooftop solar panels. I have a plug-in hybrid. I have an electric stove. I don't have a heat pump, but I will someday. I just don't want to throw out my perfectly functioning gas furnace, So politics, man, it's a bummer.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you about politics. So
yeah.
Let me start by saying that, I think we're the same age, and we grew up at during the Bush years, right? We were in
Yes.
our 20s during the Bush years. And so during
What a
that
time it was.
what a time. I feel like our parents' generation, the boomers, got the they got the like angry leftist stuff and the peace and love hippie stuff at the same time,
Yes.
because the Vietnam War and the riots happened at the same time.
Yes.
But for us, we got all the peace and love stuff front loaded in the Bush and early Obama years in the 2000s, right? Where like love is love. We want gay people to be equal, and we, like we wanted to stop fighting the stupid Iraq War, and we got all the peace and love stuff in the 2000s, and it was all done and finished and gone by the time 2013, 14 rolled around, and then we got the riots. Then we got the angry leftists. And so we got it staged. We got the hippie revolution, both parts of it, but it was staged. And so there was no sort of like good, happy hippie politics in the 2010s that like, squishy center left liberals could sort of grab onto, because it was all done. And like, by then there was only the angry, riotty leftism that was left.
Yes. I think that's rough. One of the things that's just weird about the political experience of our generation is that the gay marriage fight was won with like shocking speed, right? Like I remember, I think if you went to the Human Rights Campaign in 2010, they were gearing up for what they anticipated would be a extended political battle over this, where they were hoping that Obama would appoint Supreme Court justices who would rule in their favor. But they thought that would be an unpopular ruling when it came down, and there would be backlash, and they would have to weather the storm and fight efforts to amend the Constitution, et cetera. But instead, like public opinion actually front ran the Supreme Court. So by the time the decision came down, well, of course, they were glad to win.
Backlash.
It was almost like Democrats would have been better off if the Supreme Court had said, sorry, no, the only way to get your way on this is to fight it out in 50 different state legislatures where Republicans will be pinned down to this like now unpopular reactionary stance. But instead, like the court did it, there was no backlash. And then Republicans very deftly just like gave up on fighting this, right? And so we didn't get to have our like big, happy, like left and center left are united kind of battle around that. Instead, things got nasty.
It was shorter than we thought.
It was fast. I mean, we moved really quickly into a kind of revolution of rising expectations around race, where it turned out that Barack Obama being president did not, in fact, like single-handedly resolve every aspect of racial politics in the United States. And things turned really bitter around that fast, and many other things.
I was like, I was surprised at how bitter everybody, I was surprised at the rightist backlash. I was like, Barack Obama, he's like half black, conservative kind of guy. Like Obama was culturally conservative in many ways. And like, Obama wanted to like deport all the illegal immigrants, and he did a better job than any other president had done of just doing that. He was like refusing to support gay marriage even. And I was like, he's too conservative for me. And so then I thought Republicans would be like, okay, fine. Like black guy's president now, that's fine. That just happens. And some were fine. Some were just like, okay, cool. But then some were like, it's not my America anymore. America has fallen. And I'm like, what? Really? Like, okay. And then I think a lot of people saw that happen and got really mad. They're like, okay, America is an inherently racist nation, stamped from the beginning with the original sin of blah, 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 and pulled out all that stuff, which has been kicking around for a long time, but they just pulled it back out. And then things got angry.
Right. Well, I mean, I think two different things happen with Obama and race, right? One is that like he occasionally would weigh in what struck me as like a very mild way on questions related to race and racism, but specifically related to like racial profiling of middle class, like African-American professionals, right? I mean, like the Henry Louis Gates story at the beginning of his administration, which like Tim Scott has talked about. I mean, this is obviously like a very big deal to Black professionals, and especially Black male professionals, because it impacts them super duper directly, and it's offensive, and they are upset about it. But anytime
it was very prevalent.
Right. But anytime he said something like, if I had a son, he would look like Trayon, like conservatives lost their shit. But
They did
Obama,
lose their shit. Why did they lose their shit? I don't get it.
I mean,
Like,
because I don't think it's like super productive to call people names, but it seems like they're
racist.
kinda,
I
it
mean,
seems
yeah,
like
okay,
it seems like
fine,
they're
but,
kind of
like,
racist, and they don't
sure,
like
they're
this.
racist, but like, why? Just being racist doesn't mean you have to like care about that specific thing so much. Like you
That's
could just
right.
be like quietly racist and then like not worry about that one line.
No.
Like, I don't get it. I don't get
But
it. Anyway,
the other thing that happened is that Obama being president made white liberals much more interested in the ideas and work of Black intellectuals, right? So ideas that had been kicking around for a long time, ideas that were to the left of the ideas that Obama articulated got much higher profile. Ta-Nehisi Coates becoming a superstar, is a good example of that, right? I mean, he's older than we are, and he'd been working in journalism before Obama became president. But I mean, his work and his talent, his skills received much more mainstream recognition. And I think like the content of those, I mean, he's a great writer and a really smart person and a really intelligent, I think his stuff is worth reading, but like his thoughts on this are way to the left of the positions that Obama articulated. And he was often very critical of Obama in that kind of way. And I think a lot of Black intellectuals were. And that started pushing forward stuff that's like not really politically tenable, of which like there should be a reparations campaign is like, that was super high profile article, take, et cetera, et cetera. And, I mean, in some ways, the Democratic Party never embraced the aspects of that, like reparations, that would have like huge, obvious fiscal consequences that would crowd out like other things you might want to put in a bill. But Democrats did get much, much, much more, invested in the rhetoric of like, we need to center rate. Biden put out an executive order at some point in his administration that was like about how, we need to incorporate racial equity analysis into everything that the federal government does. And I don't think they really did that on some,
in fact, I didn't even know that existed. But,
right. So like a lot of what they did was like trying to create an American battery industry. But they did also put out executive orders about this, and like they tried to have like a reparations program for small Black farmers, and it got struck down in court, and they were bogged down in a lot of controversies over like fairly marginal stuff. But
I wrote this post a few days ago about the future of race in America. No one read it. No one was interested in it. And like, because everyone's tired of talking about this, and yet it's gone back to an intellectual thing because nobody wants to talk about racial stuff now. People, in 2017, it would just, everyone get mad. 2021, maybe everyone get mad. But now no one cares. And so I wrote this post, but basically the whole idea is that demographically, non-Hispanic white people are becoming a minority in America.
Yes.
And that's now that's baked in. That's in the cards. Unless you do some sort of like mass genocide. You've got these guys on Twitter, like these right-wing guys saying, look, an America of only 200 million people, implying that we kick out 100 million non-white people. That's what won't happen. That. And so like, and so that's a fantasy. The reality is that like in Texas, white people, non-Hispanic whites are a minority and have been so for many years. And in California, that's true for many years. And in state after state, that's going to be true.
Florida.
And Gen Z and all these people, like I think Gen Z is still majority non-Hispanic white, but I think that's the last generation that will be. And so we were always going to have to switch to an understanding of our nation that understands white people as a minority, as a minority group, deserving of all the protections of any minority group. And I think that the whole like decolonial like leftist race approach of the 2010s worked against that, you can say that in some ways that was helpful for race. So one take I'm definitely going to get canceled for by the right is to say that like racial wokeness did a lot of valuable stuff in terms of changing Americans' self-perception, self-identity. Like my Asian American friends, like, in the 2000s kind of felt a little bit like permanent foreigners and now don't.
Okay.
And I think that wokeness did that. And like, I'm going to get a lot of people really, all the right is going to get really mad at me for saying that. But I think that wokeness changed that. Wokeness made some of these people feel like they were part of America in a way they hadn't before, and that won't be reversed by Trump. And but at the same time, the attitude toward white people that, wokeness promoted was very much like sins of your ancestors kind of thing, laundered through some, like abstruse academic critical theory language, but like really it was the idea of white guilt en masse, which works really well if you're, a rich white person who doesn't need minority protections and can just like be benevolent and, like person charged, but it doesn't work really well if you're talking about the younger generation, where white people are actually a minority and are going to feel like a minority. And so my post was saying, basically, we just need to understand white people as like just another minority in America, irrespective of the historical evils of slavery, Jim Crow, and all that stuff. That was other people. That was someone else who did that, which is true. It was the older generations who did that. Younger generations aren't responsible for the sins of their ancestors, no matter how much we sort of intuitively think, sometimes like think that they should be.
So I mean, an analogy, I mean, because this is something I've updated on over the years, is like the first time I heard of like Christians doing like litigation, like religious freedom litigation, I was like, come on, man. Like, this is bullshit. Like religious freedom protections is for Jews, like,
for minorities,
but more observant Jews than we are, Amish, for minority groups. Like, this is just a Christian country. Like, but it's like the mail doesn't come on Sundays, right? Like, Christmas is a big school holiday and Passover isn't.
This is 2000 thinking. This is 2004 era thinking.
Exactly. And then I came to a point where I was like, okay, like actually church attendance and like religious observance has fallen to the level where like, yes, actual practicing Christians who have like real moral beliefs about sexuality and stuff are a minority, just like Jews and Muslims who won't eat pork. And like, we need symmetrical application of religious liberty law. What exactly that means is like, it's debatable, but whenever
irrespective of history, irrespective of the fact that in the 1800s, you had Protestant mobs burning down and like raping in Irish neighborhoods because they didn't like your Catholic faith.
And irrespective of like,
it doesn't matter now.
We have a Christian legacy in some of our institutions that is visible and is a real thing. And we should teach accurate history of these things. But like in the present day, whatever a religious liberty settlement is, has to be something that works symmetrically. And so similarly for race, I mean, I think people will always disagree about when exactly does a disparate impact like cross the line into something that's objectionable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that like, like reverse discrimination, whatever it is, like that's legitimate for white people. And really like, because Asian people are in the crosshairs of a lot of
when white people are minority, there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. Everyone's a minority.
So whatever the anti-discrimination rule is, has to be something that is applied symmetrically across racial groups. And that probably means it's just something different, right? And there's this New York Times article today that's like incredulous about the Trump Justice Department, like doing anti-discrimination litigation on behalf of white people. And like,
what's the article? I don't read the New York Times.
Oh, the lying mainstream media. I mean, it's in some ways like it's just like a good factual article about like lawsuits that they are putting forward, and it also carries the intimation that they're going to like stop investigating anti-Black racism, which is bad. But I think
will.
Right, but I mean, I think that like I agree with you. It's just like progressives need to like ratchet down their level of incredulity about this idea. You know, that like if you are a working class white family, you know, in inland Maine or in the Midwest somewhere, and like your kids are applying to school and like the admissions office is discriminating against them, like of course you would be upset about that.
Not working class. If you are a rich, extremely privileged white person from Greenwich, Connecticut, and your kid is applying to school, they deserve to be treated absolutely fairly as well.
Well, yeah, but then yes, everybody should be treated.
I don't want to put it in terms of class. It's not just like poor white people who have it bad, blah blah blah. Like we said in like the Trump people said in 2017, blah blah. There's all this working class stuff, or like Tyler Austin Harper will say now. It's not that. It's the fact that everybody's a minority in America.
Yeah. So you want to advocate? Well, yes.
Yeah, everyone's a minority. We're all minorities now. That's our country. And that understanding, I believe, is sort of the first step to building a new sense of majoritarianism of we're all Americans, which Richard Alba thinks that we're going to do.
So, and I just feel like
Have you read Richard Alba, by the way?
Yes, I know Richard Alba. He's great. He's a brilliant thinker. And if we had all read Richard Alba books when the Great Awakening began, we'd be in a better position today than we were. I feel like, I'm like, I live in DC. I talk all the time to Democrats, to people who like want to be more pragmatic about various things. I think there's like a lot of smart people in this political party, but takes of the sort that you are uncorking there are just like still, it's really off the table.
I hear that white people are just another minority.
Well, just like, yeah, I mean, just like anything that would touch on the structures, the very mannered way that progressives conduct identity politics. So like I was reading Original Sin, the new book about Joe Biden and cover-ups there. And there's just like a very incidental part of it where, Kamala Harris has become the nominee and her advisors are thinking about, should she distance herself from Biden in some way or another? And she expresses the concern that she would be perceived as disloyal if she did that, and that would be bad. And then the next passage is, what went unspoken among her team is that, it wouldn't just be any form of disloyalty. This would be a Black woman being disloyal to a white man. And I'm reading this and I'm like, come on, guys. Like, just like, the question of what exactly a presidential candidate should say on the campaign trail is like always going to be the subject of like some dispute and uncertainty. But it's like, yeah, like just like be disloyal or not. Like in a normal way. But like it's really deeply ingrained hang up. And there was so much consensus that any political weaknesses that she was facing were due to her identity. And thus this incredible belief that Tim Walz would have some just like magic powers of like dorky.
That's what people really thought. They're like, oh, they don't like Kamala because she's like,
absolutely. I mean, there was like absolutely
a white guy on the ticket. I mean, that's probably not 100% wrong. Something like that's going on, but it wasn't the biggest thing going on.
But I mean, they did not consider like any women, for the right. So it's like it's like a triple reverse identity politics where like Biden, quote unquote, needed to put a Black woman on the ticket to balance out his white maleness, which then meant that like you couldn't put the governor of Michigan on the ticket with her because it had to be a man. And there were concerns that like Pete is gay and Josh Shapiro's Jewish. And so like you like talk yourself into only considering Andy Bashir
on the ticket. Yeah.
Sure. Right. And it's too much. It's like the Democratic Party is a party that like white men are a relatively small minority of Democrats. And so you have a lot of talented politicians who are women or people of color, and you need to be like comfortable putting them in roles, but then also not like, I think, obsessed with like I thought it was really, there have always been identity considerations going into Supreme Court nominations from time immemorial, regional balance. It used to be a Jewish seat, et cetera, et cetera. But to like preannounce.
You're a Jewish seat from the Supreme Court?
Oh yeah, for years.
Who was the first Jewish justice on the Supreme Court?
Brandeis, Louis Brandeis.
Brandeis.
Yeah. But then it was like, but he's Jewish. But then it was like he like quote unquote had to be replaced with another Jew. And now we have so many. So
affirmative action for Jews.
Yes. So these things have always been with us, but to like pre-announce that you're going to select a Black woman and then have like a panel of it's like it was weird and gross and off-putting, I think. But I've been to like a lot of like let's rethink things Democrats conferences, and it's always like there'll be all these panels that don't address these issues, and then like somewhere on the sidelines, like me and 3 other middle-aged white men will be like, come on guys, like we gotta like get real. And it's like what everyone is waiting for is like a new Obama type figure who will leverage their own personal identity to like make it okay for white people to dissent. And there was talk.
Now, to what degree did Obama really leverage that personal identity? To what degree did like hopeful fans leverage that for him?
I think that this is like kind of a retcon that like pre-Obama, like Bill Clinton could be quite moderate on race and identity issues. And Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary, her support was working class white people and Latinos. And Obama had a coalition of African Americans and college educated white people. And he just very narrowly kind of beat her. And then he did like pivot to the center with a campaign that was very focused on sort of reassuring people and his big race speech, et cetera, et cetera. But like at the time when Hillary was running against him in the primary, there was no belief that like she as a white person had to be super woke. That's a political identity she adopted in 2016 to try to beat Bernie Sanders. But so I don't really know. But so it's like
wait. All right. Yeah. I don't want to get too far afield. I want to bring us back because we're we've been talking for a while. I want to bring us back to this other big question that I have, which is why are the Democrats not a credible opposition at this point? We grew up during the Bush years. We had civil liberties violations in the war on terror that were honestly quite severe.
Yes.
We then had the Iraq War, which started off popular because 9/11 meant that you had to say you liked the Iraq War. I didn't, but I was a kid, and but respectable, serious people had to say they liked the Iraq War in 2003, I guess, and then quickly sort of realized that it wasn't going well. Oddly, we won that war. We just we didn't get anything out of it. We won, but then we just didn't win anything. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But people realized over time they didn't like it. And then there was Katrina, and then there was the Great Recession, financial crisis. So there was this cascading series of failures by the Bush administration, many of them self-inflicted, a couple of them externally inflicted, that Democrats really capitalized on incredibly well. The Pelosi-Obama era of Democrats really capitalized it, and not just to win elections in 2006 and 2008, but just to make our nation more progressive in a durable way. The backlash to Bush made us a more progressive nation.
Absolutely.
The Bush-type conservatism was a dead end. It had failed in so many ways, so quickly, so catastrophically, and so obviously that Democrats just, they could have used that energy to run the table as moderate Democrats for, 50 years, or instead what they chose to do is become more progressive and bring us back to a 50-50 nation. But I guess more to the point, right now, Trump is doing tariffs that are going to screw people. Trump is brutalizing random Latino people, just to show that he can. Trump is, just slashing funding for all kinds of useful things. Trump is exploding the deficit. Trump is going to cut people off from life-saving vaccines. Trump is going to just, ally with Russia. All the dumbest crap that actually does have real-world negative implications. In Trump's first term, like people like Steve Mnuchin would, smart people would, saved us and basically stopped Trump from doing any of this insanity in his first term. They're all gone now. He's replaced them all with people who were loyal to the coup attempt of 2020. That's who's running the whole show. It's Navarro and Miller and everyone who stood by Trump when he denied the election result. That's who's running the country. And their crazy staffers who are all like Nazi poisoned from like reading a whole bunch of Nazi memes online. And so like, that's who's running our country now. And it's going to have negative consequences. Tariffs are bad for us. And even if he keeps pulling back and doing these last minute pauses, tariff uncertainty is also bad for us. Interest rates are going up. It is there is a massive debt bomb and nobody's doing a goddamn thing about it. It's going to hit us, and it's going to raise interest rates. It's going to cause economic problems. It's going to do all these things that we thought we had gotten rid of in the 90s. But
I'm with you. The orange man is bad.
But the orange man is bad, and everything, like all these things associated with the orange man are bad. Why are Democrats still less popular than Trump? Why aren't they running a table? What the hell is going on? Why don't we have a credible opposition in the country yet?
I mean, there's a few differences, right? I mean, one is you go back, Al Gore loses the election in 2000, but he won the popular vote. Ralph Nader got, a non-trivial share of votes.
Right.
And Bill Clinton was like still super popular.
But
right?
not in 04 or 05. No,
I agree. But I'm just saying, so going forward, right, it was like Democrats felt, okay, like we're going ahead, status quo. There was no bad memories, right, of Democrats that sort of haunted people. The other thing is, of course, Bush got reelected, right? And all this stuff you're talking about happened in his second term. In 2004, Democrats, people remember John Kerry as if he was like incredibly inept or something because he lost the election. But if you look at like models based on like economic fundamentals, he performed better than you would expect based on the GDP conditions. He got out fundraised by an incredible margin by Bush, but still did pretty well in that election. It turns out that I think like finding a handsome war hero was like a pretty good idea, but it didn't, get you where you needed to be.
It didn't bring you all the way.
And I feel like Democrats right now I hope this is wrong, but I feel like Democrats are going to approach 2028 the way Democrats approached 2004 or the way Republicans approached 2012, which was like, what if we just like get like a good presidential candidate? Because like Mitt Romney, good guy, smart guy, impressive career, et cetera. But he ran in 2012 on this kind of like dog shit platform that was just don't admit to any errors from the Bush years. Just say Obama is bad, say the economy is bad, and hope that people vote for him.
That's why he ran on that platform, because he couldn't run on like any vision because he couldn't sell it because he seemed like this like awkward corporate Mormon guy.
And I just think it's like there's not as much readiness as there needs to be to like own. I mean, you've written a million posts about this and I have, somewhat different ones, but like there are just real aspects of post-Obama progressive movement politics that like did not pan out. Like ideas that don't work politically, don't work substantively. And now as you're saying, like,
should I believe David Shore about what those ideas are? Or should I, what should I think people like, because some failures don't matter and some do. And some things are very unpopular, but not salient. No one gives a shit about them. Some things are like universal healthcare, like super popular and no one gives a shit about it.
Well,
because they all have Obamacare and, the health.
I think a big part of all of this is just that like people are quite change averse. The political activists and entrepreneurs like to read the public's distaste with like quote unquote the establishment as like meaning now they want all my ideas. But because people distrust the establishment, they don't like the political system, low trust environment, they're suspicious and loss averse about any kind of change, right? And it's just to try to sell people simultaneously, I'm like, we need to do universal health care and create a childcare program and transform the whole energy ecosystem and have a reckoning on that's like a lot, you know what I mean, compared to focus. The other thing that's tough is the fiscal situation is like increasingly fucked in a way that an opposition party should be able to take advantage of. But to take advantage of that situation means admitting to idea entrepreneurs who want a large expansion of the welfare state that like it's not going to happen.
sorry, JD Medlock, I love you, but it's not the time.
Right. And, to say, because
Although we will raise taxes, we do need to raise taxes. So Medlock should be happy about that.
Yes.
Taxes
But again,
without welfare, taxes without expansion. Well, we expanded welfare. I'm so angry. I'm so angry at the left's utter failure to publicize the fact that during the Clinton and Obama and Bush years, we expanded welfare massively. It was a huge success. We reduced poverty by a lot. Like the kind of desperate poverty that Evicted, that the book Evicted was about. In the 90s, you could go to poor neighborhoods and just see this absolute desperate poverty across much. That you can still see that. It's a lot harder to find now. It's like a lot of that is gone. We did a mini Great Society in the late 90s with the EITC, but especially in the 2000s, and during the Great Recession.
Yeah, so
Obama, and it worked. We reduced poverty by so much.
So I think, yes, and some of this is, the poverty measure is
George W. Bush was an actual compassionate conservative. We remember the Iraq War and torture and all the evil shit that he did, and the stupidity.
That was bad.
But yes, it was really bad. Bush was insanely bad president. However, he was an actual compassionate conservative who expanded the welfare state, reduced homelessness, raised spending on food stamps, EITC, made the tax system more progressive, and basically did a bunch of things that if he hadn't done all the other insane shit, then I actually would have said Bush is a good president if that's all he had done. I'd be like, wow, Bush is a great liberal president. He's the new Eisenhower.
Yes.
I would have said that. He would have been the new Eisenhower.
So I think, a viable agenda is like a back to Bill Clinton, right? Like free trade-ish, fiscal consolidation. Because you're Democrats, it's fiscal consolidation with an eye toward the interests of the poor. But it's like, we're not going to. Biden proposed all these tax increases in his budgets, but then essentially 99% of the money that the tax increases would have raised was going to go to, free community college, to a big childcare subsidy program. I mean, some of those I think are like good ideas that I would love to see happen. Some of them were like actually poorly written, etc. But like, I just don't think
priority in the face
this
of
is
all the
in the card, right?
Yeah.
And then also on the climate side, right? I mean, they moved to a all subsidy, no pricing sort of paradigm for addressing pollution type stuff, which was suitable, I think, to the macroeconomic circumstances of 2019, whatever. But in these days, when anything you spend money on pushes interest rates up, you need to be, it's not that you can't do any subsidies for anything, but you need to be more rigorous and selective about.
I slightly disagree with you. I disagree with you about that one.
Okay.
Like the amount of bang for the buck in terms of like investment that we got for a small amount, like the subsidies were small. Like they were big compared to other subsidies we've done, but they were silly. And, they like people said it's so huge because they use the 10-year numbers, but like they were highly effective. The problem with those things was that everyone framed them in terms of labor demand when we were already overheating the economy. That was a problem. But
that was a problem.
It was a macro problem. But in terms of adding to the debt, like student loan cancellation was like much more expensive.
Yes, and
that was really expensive.
Student loan cancellation is a great example, right? Like,
and the healthcare subsidies were like, yes, it helped some people, but it was not shouldn't have been a priority for Biden.
It's going to be challenging in an intra-party, so on the one hand, right, there's a sort of cancellation fear around cultural issues. And then, intra-coalitional bargaining around, if you want to address the pressing fiscal problems of today, we're going to have to be much more selective, right? So, you have a strong view about this, right? That like the IRA industrial subsidies were really, really, really valuable. The healthcare subsidies were much less valuable, right? And the basic problem is probably everybody in the coalition has like one thing that they love, and then like a dozen things that they're like, oh, this is less important. And like, in an expansive mode, you can just say like, we've got this for the industrial policy heads, we've got this for the healthcare people, we've got this for the childcare people, moving to a restrained agenda.
It worked in the 30s.
Yep.
And it worked in the post-war period because of the giant productivity boom. It worked in the 30s because we were underutilized capacity-wise because of the Depression, and it worked after the war because of the productivity boom, and it has never worked since then, except for a brief time in the 90s.
But
And
also,
so, like,
strong political leaders can, impose their will to an extent on members of their own coalition. Biden was not right,
yes.
but Biden was,
FDR largely failed at this in the late 30s.
yes. Well, he had some challenges.
The Southerners defected, and then he begun post 36, first 37.
But Clinton and Obama, compared to Biden, were younger and more charismatic, commanded more loyalty from their own base, had more control over the coalition itself. Trump, has a lot of control over his own coalition. He chooses to use that power mostly to facilitate corruption. Right, like a normal president would face intra-party criticism for just like taking bribes through his meme coin, because people would be like, "Come on, like we have limited political capital, like let's spend it on like advancing the cause."
Trump is
right?
your leader. It's a cult. It's a total cult.
Right, and sometimes he uses that cult to do things like let's moderate on abortion and win the election, but a lot of the time he uses it for personal profit or to pursue his very eccentric pro-Russian foreign policy, so.
Or just to strike out against anything that sounds like, green technology.
Right. So we're a little bit, at loose ends now. A charismatic savior figure, could emerge at any time. And I think it's like a good time to be kind of, ideas entrepreneuring, because there's 90 million Democrats who would like to be president. And they need to offer some like reasons why they should be president other than like, I'm kind of cool and I want the big job. But, I've seen a lot of these guys talk. They are they're talented, they're smart, but it's like, I think literally everyone who has national ambitions in the Democratic Party right now is being too risk averse. They should recognize that there's like a dozen of them, and the odds of any given person winning a presidential nomination are low. And so the positive expected value play is to be more controversial than you would be if you're trying to win the nomination for like a Senate seat, right? It's like, it's just a very crowded field. If you do everything quote unquote right, you're still probably going to lose. And you ought to try to make some waves and address the kind of stuff that we're talking about here that like, it doesn't meet with universal consensus by any means, but like people can see that the fiscal situation is not good, that you are going to have to make unpalatable choices around this. I don't know that like being honest about that will be a winning strategy, but like it might be. It's been a long time since somebody tried to talk in a real way about this, and it has some upside. And
people are still scared of the deficit, which there was a time when that was highly impractical or counterproductive. But now that is very productive. The natural fear of red ink that people have from making the flawed analogy of the government to a household actually works in our favor now, because you can just say, look at deficit number, big, scary.
Well, and also if you want, I mean, I enjoyed the new book, Abundance. I like the abundance agenda. I'm in on this. People want to use those ideas to address the cost of living, et cetera. Most of the stuff that's in that book is good ideas, but has, reasonably delayed payoff in terms of like its actual impact on the cost of living. A thing that you can do that has fairly rapid impact, because financial markets are forward-looking, is try to reduce interest rates. Like in a non-inflation, not like manipulate the Fed to cut interest rates, but like
long-term rates.
Do a credible program of fiscal consolidation. Even though the fiscal consolidation is long-term, the impact on the bond market is much more rapid than that, because markets are forward-looking. Larry Summers has a paper that's like the cost of money is part of the cost of living, which I think is correct, right? It's not part of like the consumer price index correctly. But if like people want to be able to afford to buy more stuff, bringing down borrowing costs for people looking for auto loans, for people looking for mortgages is very real.
Well, the reason I doubt, it's true, but it then ignores. Well, anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, I think someone should try.
Okay. So here's my final question. I think we should go pretty soon.
Yeah, before my phone runs out of batteries. Let's
right.
do
So
it.
mine running out of batteries. To what degree is the Democratic Party run by young staffers who are extremely progressive and whose ideas come from online progressive discussions instead of from interfacing with the real world out there? To what degree are the staffers running everything now?
I think that there's truth to that, but I think that it is overbought in certain, internet communities.
You mean by me, who always just says it as a big truth, semi-sarcastic?
I mean, by you, but people say it, right? I mean, and it is true that the staffer class is very left-wing in certain ways. The staffer class, though, are also political professionals, many of whom have, reasonable ideas about these kinds of things. The donors to the Democratic Party are very left-wing in particular ways, and also very sensitive to peer group pressure. They're not transactional donors. They're not operating a political machine in which if you win a Senate race in Iowa, they receive concrete benefits. They are expressive donors who have very strong beliefs in climate change, very strong beliefs in gun control, maybe not super strong left-wing beliefs on race and things like that, but are very sensitive to criticism from
they're a bunch of white guys don't want to be called racist.
From minority peers and things like that. And I think that the staffers are left-wing in part because the funders of the organizations that the staffers work at are left-wing. There's some feedback in the other direction. But I think you should really see that Gaza is an issue that actually separates these two dynamics. Because the staffers are very left-wing on Palestine because they're young. And the donors tend to be quite pro-Israel. To oversimplify, because many of them are Jewish. It's okay for me to say this. I'm Jewish.
Is that really
blah, blah, blah. Yes.
Money.
And right. So,
really, I would have expected Asian donors to be sort of rising and taking over at this point.
The Democratic Party, progressive donors is very, very disproportionately Jewish, quite pro-Israel.
But there's Jews are 1%. 1.5.
Yes, but I mean it's big, and so you see a real divide around this, and you've seen it play out in institutions where there has been a lot of staff pressure to do solidarity with Palestine, but also a lot of donor pressure not to do it. On most issues, there's just alignment between left-wing donors and left-wing staffers.
Between the donors and the staffers on that stuff.
Oh shit.
Who wins, the donors or the staffers?
It varies. So at the Center for American Progress, the staffers won out, and CAP criticized the Obama administration from the left on Palestine quite heavily.
In the old days. What about now, though?
Well,
what about post October 7th, 2023?
No. I mean, post October 7th.
Oh, okay. That happened.
So they were putting out statements like Obama.
So they said Obama. Sorry.
Cut off arms supplies, etc. But the guy who was executive director of that organization has left since then. Mira Tandon, who I've known for a long time, who one of the things she specifically did in her previous stint as president of CAP was disciplined left-wing staffers who wanted to criticize Israel too much. And it would be overly simplified it to say she was brought in specifically to discipline people on that issue, but that's not what happened. If you know what I mean, there is an element there. Staffers in the particular circumstances of COVID could really bully everybody, but in the real world, if you're writing the checks, you can get what you want.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
So, we'll see.
All right, we'll see. I just think, given all the dumb shit things that Trump is doing, given all the ways that he's hurting the nation and that he's going to hurt the nation, this is a huge opportunity for Democrats to define the opposition, to define the alternative. And I think in the Bush years, after
Yes.
2000, after 2004, I can say, because I strongly supported that, I was just a youngster at the time, we really stepped up and really, we can talk about the problems of the groups and the problems of like Obama era progressivism all day long. But I think at the end of the day, that was a cohesive political program that racked up a lot of victories, changed the country, and did what they needed to do.
Yes, but in 06 and 08, they recruited. They had a very deliberate big tent candidate recruitment strategy, and then the leadership stood behind that and said, like, it is good that I have these pro-gun House candidates, that I have some pro-life House candidates, et cetera. And so that not only like put certain places more on the map, but it did what you were saying. It clarified what's the core of the critique of Bush and what's just like stuff that left-wing people think. Right. Yeah. Like it was still the case that like left-wing people favored gun control, have, abortion rights, et cetera. But they were like, the critique of Bush is something more specific than that. And that's why we have all these people on the team. And, so this is in Australian Labor calls this the quote unquote narrow target campaign. And they won and they got reelected, and it's just like, you edit down what you're talking about. You got to decide like what's really important to us and what's important to the voters, and say like everything else, like it's fine. Like you can be left wing and zany on whatever other topics you want, but you also have the option to not be like that. That's not the
final question.
No.
To what degree do the people in the Democratic Party, including donors, staffers, electeds, all the other people, activists, I don't know, the groups, to what degree do all these people think that they still have a natural majority out there?
I think that they are recognizing that they don't, but we are in the bargaining phase of grief right now.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like that's what all this like liberal Joe Rogan stuff is about.
I see.
Right? Like there's a problem. Yeah, but like maybe there's a really superficial solution.
Right. Are we going to get clarity on what the Democrats are all about before the midterms?
I hope so. We'll see.
All right,
some stuff should roll out this summer. We'll see if it goes. Well, it's been great talking to you. I hope everyone has a happy Memorial Day. I'm out of batteries. The lithium ion, it's not good enough yet.
It's getting better all the time. And China's batteries probably last longer. If we were in China, we'd still be talking.
If I had a Xiaomi, yeah. Okay. Well, good to see you. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Peace out.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and erictornberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.